What's cracking, guys? Omar Isaf here, back with another video. Back today with not only a bodybuilder, or what did Dave Draper call it?
A muscle builder.
A muscle builder, but also someone who can speak on the topic of bodybuilding. If we take a look at the average commercial gym, most individuals would probably say, or most gyms, they do some form of bodybuilding. But then the question arises, recently, is bodybuilding healthy? And when that question is asked, we have to first of all define what is bodybuilding and how are we defining health. So two major definitions, but I figured someone who's done a lot of research, you actually have something that's in peer review. It just got
accepted, actually.
Yeah.
It's a review about this specific topic, especially the mental health aspect.
Let's talk a little bit about bodybuilding and let's have a discussion on whether or not it's healthy. So first off, Eric, thank you for being on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Omar. And this is a lot to unpack because bodybuilding has a rich and I would say tumultuous history in that it's probably changed more than most sports since its inception, which competitive bodybuilding, if you wanted to argue when were muscle-focused physique shows that were judged actually first implemented, we're talking like just around the turn of the century.
Yep.
The first ones I'm aware of are like 1898. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at literally just about 120 years of history there, if I've done math right. And they've changed a lot in that time. So what they mean has a different cultural context at different times. That means that a bodybuilding show in 1910, a bodybuilding show in 1950, and a bodybuilding show in 2005 are all going to have different aspects to them.
Yeah.
It also is going to be a different story if you're talking to someone who does an INBF show, mm-hmm. A drug-free show, or someone who is competing in the IFBB Pro League,
right?
Where there's just an obligatory level of performance-enhancing drug use that you are sacrificing your health. If you guys want to check out our Iron Culture episode with Dr. Mike Israetel and John Meadows, they go into that. Mm-hmm. It's extremely gradated, and many people are not going to think competitive bodybuilding when you say bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Building the body is a very straightforward kind of fundamental aspect of fitness. So some people are going to think, oh, so I do some form of cardio, I do maybe some stretching, but largely I have a training and nutrition plan around building symmetrical muscle.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just kind of, hey, I live a life in moderation, I focus on protein-based foods, I eat a lot of fruit and vegetables, and I lift weights.
Yeah.
And I think that would be largely something that we would want everyone to do, so long as they enjoyed it. But competitive bodybuilding in and of itself it's a tough one. Is it healthy? Is a really good question. And you take this aspect of wellness that we'd want to apply to everyone, and when you add that competitive element, that's when the extremes come into play.
Right.
So I do think we have to consider it like any other sport as whether or not it's healthy.
Yeah.
A great parallel I like to use is football healthy?
Sure.
American football. And that's something where there's a lot of debate around that, but it's nuanced debate because it's something our culture is very familiar with. So for example, 10 years ago, we would say, yeah, you might get an ACL tear. Yeah, you might get your shoulder damage. Yeah, you might get a concussion. But it's well worth it because, football teaches teamwork, grit, hard work, knowing your role, staying in your lane, losing gracefully, and pushing towards a common goal. That's just an example.
Yep.
And then recently we found out, oh man, some of these concussions can result in long-term effects, traumatic brain injury, violent behavior later in life, and maybe this isn't just the culture of football that's causing some of these domestic abuse cases we're seeing. There's actually true brain trauma that is lingering. But it hasn't changed the fact that we're still willing to put our children into high school programs, that we are still saying, hey, our universities are going to be funded 90% in the States by the college football system, and that it's something that we value as a community. Even with that,
right?
And we've done things like implement concussion screening and new medical screening and techniques to limit the number of concussions someone can have in a season before we pull them out. And basically what we've done is improved informed consent.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest problem with bodybuilding right now is that there's not a lot of informed consent. You have some people that don't know that you have to diet to go into shows. People ask me, how much weight do you gain to go into a show? Because it's bodybuilding.
Right.
And I go, I lose 25 pounds after I look lean.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think the issue with bodybuilding is that right now, bodybuilding, or I should say physique competition as a whole, now has new divisions. So since 2012, we had men's physique. Shortly after that, we have bikini, and there's many different classes, all which are a little more mainstream.
Right.
So I understand why promoters and organizations are doing this. We're trying to get greater uptake. They're trying to make running a show actually not a net money loss, which it typically is, and increase participation. Yeah. And I think that's very understandable, but we also have to realize that when you make something more accessible, more mainstream, you're going to get larger amounts of people into it who are less informed. There's a lot of people who do their first show is like, I'm turning 40 and I want to get on stage. That'll be a great transformation for me. Yeah. And they get in great shape, but then have no way to manage the hyperphagia, which is I dieted and now all I want to do is eat food. Sure. I had these strict rules and now I don't know how to transition back to regular life. Or maybe I had a history of eating disorder that I dealt with and I've made this transition and now it's come back. I didn't expect that. Yeah. So there's a lot going on because bodybuilding requires an extreme diet, a very low body fat that you get to, and therefore extreme restraint and some type of system of restraint that might be flexible or rigid or anywhere in between that continuum. And the physiological effects of getting very, very lean are going to push you towards the exact opposite. Yeah. They're going to push you towards obsessive tendencies. And the people who tend to gravitate towards bodybuilding tend to have a poorer history in terms of their relationship with their body and food. So we have a predisposition. We have what you have to do to get into shape. And then we also have the physiological effects of dieting. And those three things together are going to interact with someone's health mentally.
No, I was going to say, I like what you say. From interacting with you a lot, and we do that podcast, Iron Culture podcast, which everyone should check out. We'll link it in the description. A great kind of explanation, one of the great counters when people try and define healthy is if we just take a look at injury rates, which is from a physical manifestation, some of the problems of any sport, any physical discipline. Bodybuilding actually is, what is it, 1/3 as likely as powerlifting and weightlifting for you to be injured.
And CrossFit.
And CrossFit. So from a pure injury standpoint, bodybuilding is actually far less dangerous. And also compared to professional sport or other athletic endeavors, contact sports.
And even endurance sport, they're all higher. Yeah, so in the lifting disciplines as a whole, if you look at the number of injuries defined as when you have to take time off of training per 1,000 hours, the lifting disciplines as a whole are less injurious than contact sports and team sports, which are almost always contact sports, but also endurance, cycling, things like that, where you get a lot of repetitive use injuries, or even sprinting, where you get less repetitive use, but more like, just pop my hamstring. Yep. So they're lower as a whole, except for arguably like strongman and Highland Games. They tend to be quite high. And then kind of pretty low, but not as low as bodybuilding, are the barbell sports. Yeah. So powerlifting, weightlifting, and haters out there, CrossFit, same injury rates as powerlifting and weightlifting. I know that's hard to take. And then 1/3 of those is bodybuilding. Yeah. Because it allows a lot more, it's lower load and it gives you a lot more flexibility with exercise selection.
And so that's how do we define health? If we're defining health physically, then I would argue bodybuilding is healthier than those other disciplines, which is an interesting way to frame it. But if we talk about the mental aspect, which is what a lot of people focus on, we had recently Jake Lenardin on talking about eating disorders. And so when people talk about is bodybuilding healthy, they're kind of talking about the mental aspect. What are some things that individuals need to be aware of? Where you said those that have a predisposition towards eating disorders or body dysmorphia, they tend to gravitate towards almost enabling some of those tendencies. So what are some things that people need to be made aware of? Or I guess another way of phrasing is, who is bodybuilding for? Competitive bodybuilding.
Right. So this is kind of one of those chicken or egg white scenarios.
If we only do egg white, that's, you're prepping, so I forgive that terrible joke.
And by forgive, he means congratulate. But the chicken or egg scenario is that when we look at the rates of eating disorders that are present among competitors, they're quite high. There was a recent study by Lindsay and colleagues that came out, and 5 out of 16 of the men's physique competitors, which is about 31%, had said that they had a previously diagnosed eating or body image disorder. That's incredibly high. And then there's data showing that among female bodybuilders back in the 90s, like 40-something% of them used to be anorexic. Yeah. Now there's different types of eating disorders. It's not uncommon to actually have a binge eating disorder or symptom or period, maybe it's subclinical, doesn't actually meet the DSM criteria, as a result of doing a bodybuilding show. That's a normal response to getting really, really, really lean. So developing binge eating disorder from bodybuilding temporarily, not uncommon. Having had anorexia previously, also relatively common, but is bodybuilding making one of those worse or the other? It's going to be situation dependent. So for example, anorexia nervosa is one of it's extremely risky eating disorder. It can result in death, and it's one of the ones that's most difficult to treat. So if someone has gone from anorexia nervosa, which means a guy at 6 foot, by the time I'm near the point where I might lose to the disease, I'm going to be under 100 pounds, dying, medically treated, them trying to force feed me to actually eat enough. Clearly, if I've gone from there to bodybuilding, that's a step in the right direction.
Right.
I'm actually gaining or attempting to gain weight, or in a sport where I understand gaining muscle is a thing. And I've been in a surplus at some point. So you could make the argument, and of course it's case by case, and it might not be the best solution by any means, that going from anorexia nervosa to bodybuilding could be seen as a positive step. However, someone who has had no issue ever, and this is like my first season, who then spends 2 months gaining 50 pounds when they don't want to and being out of control and experiencing, I probably did reach the clinical diagnosis for binge eating disorder for at least a handful of months. That's not good either. So it is specific to the individual, the situation, and all of that. So I would say, who is it for? Well, if you have an unhealthy relationship with food currently, or if you have had a history of eating disorders, I think you need to know that it's very likely they could be exacerbated by the process of competing in bodybuilding, and you'd only want to do that with the supervision of, I would say, a therapist experience in this, and you at the very least want to really shore up those relationships. And then the approach you take in bodybuilding, whether you have an attitude of flexible restraint, which is characterized by having a non-black and white view of foods, not I'm on a clean or dirty diet, but perhaps I have an understanding of higher and lower calories, what I need to eat, and that no food is really off limits, but what makes sense for my goals, and that you might take a more flexible approach, like you're not eating specifically this time, you're not trying to hit an exact macronutrient target using ranges, continuums. Those will have different results. And someone's ability to be flexible is not just the system, but it's also the mindset they have. So if they trend towards those extreme rigidness, that can result in a poor outcome as well. So how you do it, your background, those are going to influence on who should do bodybuilding. But I really recommend everybody, as a competitive bodybuilder, there is so much richness to be had from bodybuilding as a lifestyle rather than as a competitive pursuit.
That's a really good point.
There's no reason you have to get on stage. You can find what's a sustainable body fat that allows me to display muscularity, that I'm not food focused, focus on just building muscle. You can have some bulk and cut cycles. You can focus on performance, holistic development. There are elements of competitive bodybuilding that are cool. Like, it is not a sport, in my opinion.
Right.
You are an athlete. You do compete. But the actual competition process on the day of is not where the athletic... it's not where the most important component of the athleticism determines the outcome. So you can make an argument it's not a sport, that it's a competitive... athletic endeavor with a performance component. So there's an artistic element, that posing routine. You get to express yourself. It's largely unjudged. So you're making yourself your own art project.
I was judging your performance, and I rated it very highly, 11 out of 10.
Thank you very much. So you get to be a bit of an artist. You get to be a bit of a performer. You get to be a bit of an athlete, and how much you value those different things. That's kind of cool. You know, so how you find meaning in bodybuilding is quite individual. And you can still do those things without getting on stage. So I know that at various times it's hot, it's cool to be a competitive bodybuilder. Like Matt Ogus inspired a whole generation of natural bodybuilders. Many of them stuck with it, many of them didn't. And that's a good thing. But I would say there's a lot to get out of bodybuilding and learn from bodybuilders without actually being a competitive physique athlete.
We are muscle builders, Dave Draper style. The last thing I want to touch on that I think is important, and we'll perhaps link both Jake Lenardin's Instagram, Break Binge Eating, as well as the episode that we did for Iron Culture on eating disorders, where I think an aspect that's not talked about often or nearly often enough would be the male component of both body dysmorphias, eating disorders, my demographic is about 85% male, 15% female. Usually a lot of these things are labeled more on the female side, but just kind of as a PSA, if any male, any individual who might not even be or choosing to compete in bodybuilding, but some of these things are describing some of their tendencies, because we see these tendencies in competitive bodybuilding, but it doesn't mean that the average lifting bro doesn't deal with some of these issues. And I think 100%. With social media, that expectation to look a certain way, then you take a look at yourself in the mirror, you're not happy with that. Some of the eating habits potentially someone develops. I think there's a lot of undiagnosed or underdiagnosed aspects when it comes to males. So in your experience, can you comment on any of that?
Yeah, I think that the rates are going up. As much as I feel like my childhood has become mainstream, like I used to love reading comics. I used to get made fun of for being a nerd. But now the Marvel movies are just as popular, if not more popular than anything else. So the male athletic, or I should say the male muscular ideal is very prominent now. You know, Jake Leonardon pointed out how Luke Skywalker's gone from being kind of a skinny, kind of monk-like martial artist to now being a jacked bodybuilder with a V-taper, the actual action figure. And how the bodybuilding physique is much more common among actors now, who are superheroes. So while that's cool and while we like it, and while it went from just kind of being Arnold in the 80s to now being everybody, it does have an effect on us. And then Instagram as well, with the constant nature of it and the way you're looking at it and the way people market themselves, I think there is a lot of implicit and explicit pressure on males that is starting to bring their societal pressures, probably not up to what it is for women, but high enough that we are seeing higher rates and increasing rates of body image issues and eating disorders among men. So it's something that we need to be aware of. And I think for everyone out there, because I know you have a lot of personal trainers who follow you, a lot of people with Instagram accounts, and we ourselves, we have to realize that promoting muscularity as being better than not being muscular, that's kind of bullshit. You know what I'm saying? I think this should be personal choice. Like there's no real benefit to looking like a bodybuilder. I think it's inherently subjective to decide what's attractive, and that changes over time. If you, ideally, you're totally happy with yourself, and you decide, you know, I want to be a little more muscular. You know. And it
rather
should
than
be,
this completes me. I'm empty on the inside. It's like, oh,
right?
Okay.
Because if we want to talk about health, you know, you can be in the overweight category. And actually, the demographics aren't even that much different from the normal weight. It's not until you actually get into the obese classifications of the BMI where you start to see strong associations with negative health and body weight. And being below normal is also unhealthy. So, like, we have to remember that health can occur at almost any size. I wouldn't say it occur in everyone at every size, but you can be quite healthy and have a body fat percentage that maybe isn't ripped or jacked or muscular. And there shouldn't be any moral judgment about that. But unfortunately, there's a ton of messages like that. So when I show my muscular physique as a bodybuilder, I need to be very intentional. Am I promoting the aesthetics lifestyle and saying that, hey, you're going to be happier if you have shredded abs or whatever? That's the thing. It's like I'm very intentional when I show my body as a bodybuilder. I show it in the context of competitive bodybuilding. It's just like a pitcher saying, hey, I went to practice through 100 fastballs today and just put a video up. I try to keep it in the context of competitive bodybuilding. Or I might show an artistic pose like I did with when I was paying homage to Frank Zane. That's me expressing myself. It's not me saying, hey, and I'm so happy, this is great, it's amazing, and my life's great, and let me teach you how for my master's course, right? Or I am specifically promoting like a training program or something to say, hey, this is a bodybuilding specific something. But what you will not see me do, and it's very intentional now, is I won't try to promote just generally myself or a lifestyle or some type of product just by saying, hey, listen to me, look at me, I've got a great physique. And I don't think all influencers realize the potential harm of doing that. I do think it's just kind of what you do because we get rewarded by getting a lot of likes. But we need to be very intentional. Don't give the message that it is morally better or societally better, or it's you can only be healthy if, or you can only be accepted or part of the crew or whatever by being muscular. Because I think that furthers these increasing rates of of eating disorders and body image issues. So please be responsible and think about what you're doing and what it means.
Like I said, it's more prevalent. I think the question is larger than just, is bodybuilding healthy? It's what type of signaling, what type of messaging is the fitness industry giving to individuals as a whole? So it expands beyond that.
And if I could take a hot take off that, I will even go as far to say that the competitive bodybuilding division, that's the most extreme, is probably where the least amount of the eating disorders and unhealthy relationships are, because it's a little bit divorced from the mainstream. Like there's no societal messages saying, hey, you need to get veins in your glutes.
Right.
For men or women.
Right.
Looking muscular, sure. And that's why the bikini class and the men's physique class are growing and growing and growing. So I totally agree. There's an issue more in the kind of bodybuilding fitness industry.
Right. That what you love also, I think it's important to take an honest look at it. And
Yes.
I think that's what you're doing. And I think for everyone out there, you should be following your Instagram, because I like the content, not only the old school content you're posting, but how you reframe things, where you're able correctly to take a look, take an honest look at bodybuilding, at the things that you do, analyze it, and then provide some genuine takeaway points I think other people aren't thinking about. They maybe don't have the context, the experience, and the research, all those things combined, to have those opinions and to share that level of information.
Well, thank you. I greatly appreciate that. And I hope this has been helpful to anyone who's thinking about competing, just wants to get into lifting for the purposes of molding their own body, or maybe has felt pressure to look a certain way, and hopefully it alleviates that a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess I'll let you close out your own channel's video, so I'll stop there.
I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Eric, thank you for being on. I'm going to link his Instagram, like I said, in the description, 3dmusclejourneyalso.com. That's what you do your coaching. Oh, snap. Now, see, that's
I'm a better person than all of you.
No, I'm more morally superior
Correct.
too, right?
Yeah.
Because I resist temptation every single day.
I don't eat
yeah, you're breatharian.
Well, and protein.
Yeah, right. Breathe, air plus, that makes sense.
Air plus protein, the
Yeah.
two macros you need.
Yeah, equals just a ripped vascular physique. Those two plus our podcast, which I'm thrilled at the feedback we've been getting. That episode on eating disorders, that episode on bodybuilders, enhanced bodybuilders, talking about it. I'll have both of those linked, as well as
Bodybuilding psychology.
Bodybuilding psychology. There's a lot, and then we get into the science, people that want more in-depth takes on things like the ketogenic diet, even the carnivore diet, periodization, autoregulation. We have one coming up, a strength roundtable, hypertrophy roundtable, a lot of really cool stuff. That's linked in the description. And lastly, Jake Lenardin is anyone that might even suspect that they have some sort of eating disorder or just want more information on that. Break binge eating, that will be linked in the description. But thank you everyone for watching this video. If you liked the video, make sure to like the damn video, and I'll see all you guys, my rascals, in that next one. Peace.
Eat your vegetables, eat your vegetables, eat your fucking vegetables.